Welcome to this Roman Catholic Church history documentary, where we trace over 2,000 years of faith, leadership, and global influence, from the founding of the Church in 33 AD to its role in today's world. This documentary explores the key events, councils, popes, and movements that shaped the Church's spiritual, cultural, and social impact. Every moment presented here is historically accurate, providing a clear, chronological understanding of the Church's evolution without speculation or exaggeration. Whether you are a student of history, religion, or simply curious about the global institution that has influenced billions, this documentary offers a comprehensive and detailed journey through the entire history of the Roman Catholic Church. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more historical documentary like this. 33 AD marks the traditional date of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, events that form the foundation of Christianity. Jesus' public ministry, estimated between 27 AD and 30 AD, focused on Judea, Galilee, and the surrounding regions. Following his death, his disciples began organizing small communities to continue his teachings. Key figures included Peter, traditionally recognized as the first bishop of Rome, and John, associated with the Johannine community. Early Christians were initially considered a Jewish sect, following Jewish law while asserting the messianic significance of Jesus. Between 33 AD and 44 AD, the apostles traveled extensively. Peter is recorded in Acts and early church traditions as preaching in Jerusalem and eventually moving to Rome. Early Christian communities in Jerusalem were led by James, known as the brother of the Lord, who functioned as a central authority until his death, traditionally dated around 62 AD. The Jerusalem Church maintained adherence to Mosaic law while engaging in debates about the inclusion of Gentiles. The expansion of Christianity among non-Jews prompted significant internal discussion. By 49 AD, the Council of Jerusalem, as recorded in Acts 15, convened to determine whether Gentile converts were required to follow Jewish law. This council decreed that Gentiles did not need to fully adhere to Mosaic ceremonial law, but were to observe certain minimal regulations, establishing an early precedent for the Church's doctrinal authority and flexibility. During the 50s and 60s AD, Paul of Tarsus undertook multiple missionary journeys throughout Asia Minor, Macedonia, and Greece. His epistles to emerging Christian communities, including the letters to the Romans, circa 57 AD, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Thessalonians, formed the earliest preserved Christian writings. These letters addressed theological doctrine, ethical behavior, community organization, and responses to persecution, reflecting the challenges faced by fledgling Christian groups in a polytheistic Roman world. Paul's missions coincided with the period of persecution under Emperor Nero, especially following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. According to Tacitus, Nero blamed Christians for the fire, leading to executions that included crucifixions and burnings. Early tradition holds that Peter was crucified in Rome around 64 AD, and Paul was beheaded, possibly in 67 AD. These martyrdoms reinforced the perception of Christians as a distinct religious community under pressure from both Jewish authorities and the Roman state. By the end of the 1st century AD, Christian communities had spread to major urban centers across the Roman Empire, including Antioch, Alexandria, Corinth, Ephesus, and Rome. Christianity remained illegal under Roman law, but persisted due to local networks of believers and house churches. Early Christians employed oral tradition, catechesis, and communal worship, which included readings from Hebrew scriptures, communal meals, and teachings of the apostles. Textual evidence from this period includes letters such as 1 Clement, written around 95 to 100 AD from the Roman Church to the Corinthian community. This epistle demonstrates the emerging authority of the Bishop of Rome, emphasizing order, the correction of disputes, and moral guidance. It reflects an early hierarchical structure in which the Roman Church exercised a guiding influence over other Christian communities. 1 Clement also shows the transition from oral to written authority within the early church, marking a shift toward codifying leadership and doctrine. In addition to 1 Clement, other writings, such as the letters of Ignatius of Antioch, circa 107 AD, further illustrate the development of ecclesiastical hierarchy. Ignatius addressed the organization of bishops, presbyters, and deacons, stressing unity and adherence to doctrine. His letters, though slightly later than the 1st century, demonstrate continuity from the initial apostolic leadership and provide evidence of how early Christian communities navigated doctrinal cohesion and practical challenges. During 33 AD, 100 AD, the relationship between Christians and the Roman authorities remained tenuous. Early Christians were occasionally accused of atheism for rejecting Roman gods, and of sedition for refusing military service or participation in civic rituals. Local persecutions were sporadic and often prompted by social tensions rather than formal imperial policy. Nonetheless, by the end of the 1st century, Christianity had established a recognizable identity, differentiated from Judaism, with a structured leadership and doctrinal foundation. The Jewish context of early Christianity influenced its theological development. Early Christians observed the Torah while asserting that Jesus fulfilled prophetic expectations. Conflicts with some Jewish authorities, as reflected in historical texts, occasionally led to violent confrontations and reinforced the separation of Christian communities from the synagogue. By the close of the 1st century, these tensions had contributed to the formation of a distinct Christian identity, encompassing both Jewish and Gentile believers. Missionary activity during this period also laid the groundwork for Christianity's geographic spread. Communities in Antioch became a center for Gentile converts, where followers were first called Christians. Egypt, particularly Alexandria, became a hub of theological reflection, producing early Christian writings and interpretations of Hebrew scriptures in the Greek language, Septuagint. Asia Minor, through cities such as Ephesus, housed communities that would later contribute to the Johannine literature. The end of the 1st century also saw the compilation of Christian texts that would eventually be included in the New Testament canon. While not formalized, letters of Paul, the Gospel of Mark, estimated 66 to 70 AD, and the Gospel of Matthew, circa 80 to 85 AD, were circulated among communities, providing guidance and preserving the teachings of Jesus. These texts formed the basis for doctrinal instruction and ethical norms, ensuring consistency across geographically dispersed communities. By 100 AD, Christianity had established foundational structures, the apostles' teachings preserved through oral and written transmission, bishops exercising authority in urban centers, and early communities maintaining worship and communal life despite persecution. The Roman Church had begun to assert moral and doctrinal influence, as evidenced by correspondence like 1 Clement. Missionary activities, theological reflection, and hierarchical development during 33 AD, 100 AD set the stage for Christianity's transition from a persecuted sect to a formally recognized religion in the coming centuries. From 100 AD to 313 AD, the Roman Catholic Church experienced both expansion and severe persecution, a period crucial to shaping its organizational structure, theological foundations, and global resilience. Early Christian communities had spread throughout the Roman Empire, establishing churches in major cities including Rome, Antioch, Alexandria, Carthage, Corinth, and Ephesus. These communities operated largely in private homes, catacombs, and rented spaces, as Christianity remained illegal under Roman law. In the 2nd century, Christians faced sporadic but sometimes intense persecution under emperors. Emperor Trajan, 98 to 117 AD, set a precedent with his correspondence to Pliny the Younger around 112 AD, advising that Christians should not be sought out proactively, but if accused and refusing to renounce their faith, they were to be punished. Trajan's policy, though not a large-scale persecution, demonstrated that adherence to Christianity could lead to capital punishment. Other emperors, such as Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD, and Antoninus Pius, 138 to 161 AD, maintained similar attitudes, with localized persecutions reflecting the tension between the empire's law and the growing Christian population. By 107 AD, Ignatius of Antioch, en route to martyrdom in Rome, wrote letters to churches in Asia Minor emphasizing unity, obedience to bishops, and adherence to correct doctrine. In his letter to the Romans, Ignatius refers to the Roman Church as presiding in love, highlighting the emerging moral and administrative authority of the Bishop of Rome over other communities. His letters are among the earliest evidence of hierarchical leadership in the Church, establishing bishops as central figures responsible for doctrinal integrity and communal order. Around 170 AD, Irenaeus of Lyons, writing against heresies, further articulated the importance of the Roman Church. He argued that the Roman bishop maintained continuity with the apostolic tradition, linking back to Peter and Paul. Irenaeus' work was primarily directed against Gnostic teachings, emphasizing the unity and universality of Christian doctrine. His appeals to Rome strengthened the notion of a central authority, which would later become a defining feature of the Church's structure. Persecution intensified in the 3rd century. Emperor Decius, 249 to 251 AD, initiated the first empire-wide persecution of Christians, requiring public sacrifice to Roman gods and issuing certificates, labelli, confirming compliance. Christians who refused to comply faced imprisonment, torture, and execution. This period tested the resilience of Christian communities, prompting debates over how to reintegrate lapsed members who had complied under duress. Cornelius, Bishop of Rome, 251 to 253 AD, and Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage, d. 258 AD, addressed these issues in detailed letters and treatises, establishing early canonical norms for reconciliation and penance. The Decian persecution was followed by sporadic attacks, culminating in the Diocletianic persecution, beginning in 303 AD under Emperor Diocletian, reigned 284 to 305 AD. Diocletian sought to restore traditional Roman religious practices, issuing edicts to destroy Christian churches, burn scriptures, and imprison clergy. This great persecution affected all provinces of the empire, including Africa, Asia Minor, and Italy. Key Christian figures, such as Saint Agnes, d. 304 AD, Saint George, traditional dates 280 to 303 AD, and Saint Sebastian, c. 256 to 288 AD, were martyred during this period, reinforcing the narrative of Christian endurance and faithfulness. During these centuries, the church hierarchy developed into a more organized system. Bishops presided over dioceses, presbyters, priests, assisted in teaching and sacramental duties, and deacons handled charitable functions. The Bishop of Rome gradually assumed a position of moral and administrative primacy. Letters such as 1 Clement, 95 to 100 AD, and writings from the 2nd century reflect continuity in episcopal leadership, emphasizing reconciliation, doctrinal enforcement, and ethical guidance. Theological development also progressed significantly. Early controversies addressed Christology, the nature of God, and heresies such as Gnosticism and Marcionism. The early church formulated creeds and statements of belief orally and in writing, emphasizing monotheism, the divinity of Christ, and the resurrection. Apologists like Justin Martyr, c. 100 to 165 AD, wrote defenses of Christianity for Roman authorities, arguing that Christians were ethical citizens rather than threats to the state. Tatian, Clement of Alexandria, c. 150 to 215 AD, and Origen, c. 184 to 253 AD, produced systematic theological works, providing the intellectual foundations for subsequent doctrinal councils. Christian communities also responded to internal organizational needs. The process of developing a canon of Scripture began in this period, with epistles of Paul, the Gospels, and other writings circulating among churches. While not formalized, the texts were increasingly recognized for doctrinal authority. Church fathers emphasized consistency in teaching, reinforcing orthodoxy and rejecting divergent interpretations. The early 3rd century saw additional persecutions under emperors such as Valerian, 253 to 260 AD, who targeted bishops and clergy, resulting in mass executions. During these crises, communities relied on underground networks, secret meetings, and written correspondence to maintain cohesion. Leaders such as Cyprian emphasized unity, warning against schism and encouraging reconciliation for those who had lapsed under pressure. His writings on the unity of the Church and the authority of bishops were instrumental in shaping ecclesiastical governance. By the early 4th century, Constantine the Great, reigned 306 to 337 AD, rose to power. In 312 AD, before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine reportedly experienced a vision leading to his conversion to Christianity. In 313 AD, Constantine and Licinius issued the Edict of Milan, granting freedom of worship and legal recognition to Christians. This edict ended systemic persecution and allowed Christians to own property, build churches, and participate openly in civic life. The Edict of Milan marks the transition from clandestine worship to the establishment of Christianity as a legally recognized religion, setting the stage for its imperial patronage in subsequent decades. During this period, the Church also expanded geographically. Urban centers became hubs of Christian activity, while rural areas saw the gradual establishment of local communities. Missionary activity extended to regions such as Gaul, Britain, and North Africa. Leaders like Irenaeus and Tertullian, c. 155 to 240 AD, contributed to the spread of doctrine and defense against heretical teachings. Catacombs in Rome, such as those on the Via Appia, provide archaeological evidence of Christian burial practices, symbolic art, and the veneration of martyrs during times of persecution. By 313 AD, the Church had evolved from a small sect into a structured institution with defined leadership, theological clarity, and widespread geographic presence. The experience of persecution had solidified the authority of bishops, reinforced the unity of doctrine, and fostered a sense of continuity that traced back to the apostles. The groundwork laid during 100 AD, 313 AD would enable the Church to navigate the transition to imperial favor and to become a dominant religious force in the subsequent centuries. The period from 313 AD to 476 AD represents the transformation of the Roman Catholic Church from a persecuted minority to an institution closely entwined with imperial authority. The Edict of Milan in 313 AD, issued by Constantine the Great and Licinius, legally recognized Christianity throughout the Roman Empire, ending the state-sanctioned persecution that had persisted for centuries. This legal recognition allowed Christians to practice openly, own property, construct churches, and participate in civic and administrative life without fear of punishment. Following the Edict of Milan, Constantine embarked on a program of ecclesiastical patronage. In 324 AD, after consolidating power as sole emperor, he moved the imperial capital to Byzantium, later renamed Constantinople, while maintaining Rome's religious significance. Constantine sponsored the construction of significant churches, including the original Basilica of St. Peter in Rome and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, circa 335 AD. These constructions demonstrated the integration of church and state resources and reinforced the Church's public prominence. The first major doctrinal council under imperial sponsorship occurred in 325 AD. The First Council of Nicaea, convened by Constantine in response to the Arian controversy, addressed the question of Christ's divinity. Arius, a presbyter from Alexandria, argued that Christ was a created being, subordinate to God the Father. The council rejected Arianism and affirmed the homoousios clause, declaring Christ to be of the same substance as the Father. The resulting Nicene Creed established foundational Christological doctrine and set a precedent for ecumenical councils as a mechanism for resolving theological disputes within the empire. In the decades following Nicaea, further councils were convened to refine doctrine and address emerging heresies. The First Council of Constantinople in 381 AD expanded the Nicene Creed to clarify the divinity of the Holy Spirit and reaffirmed the position of the Roman Church in doctrinal matters. These councils reinforced theological uniformity and solidified the Church's role as a stabilizing moral and spiritual authority across the empire. The Church's organizational structure developed rapidly during this period. Bishops administered dioceses, supported by priests and deacons, while metropolitan bishops oversaw provincial structures. The Bishop of Rome increasingly asserted primacy, claiming apostolic succession from Peter. Pope Damasus I, 366 to 384 AD, emphasized the Roman see's authority, commissioning St. Jerome to produce a Latin translation of the Bible, the Vulgate, completed around 382 AD. The Vulgate standardized scripture for Latin-speaking Christians and became a critical tool for doctrinal education and liturgical practice for centuries. The integration of church and empire also involved legal and administrative measures. Constantine's legislation, such as the 321 AD Sunday rest law, acknowledged Christian practices within imperial policy. Church leaders gained privileges, including tax exemptions and judicial authority in ecclesiastical matters. The increasing prominence of bishops also provided the state with a network of educated, disciplined officials capable of managing local populations, further intertwining religious and civil authority. By the late 4th century, under Emperor Theodosius I, reigned 379 to 395 AD, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. The Edict of Thessalonica in 380 AD declared Nicene Christianity the sole authorized faith, while Arianism and pagan practices were progressively suppressed. Theodosius reinforced church authority and mandated participation in Orthodox Christian practice among imperial subjects, creating a de facto religious uniformity across the empire. Amid these developments, the Western Roman Empire faced increasing political instability. Rome's position as an imperial center declined, but the Bishop of Rome's influence expanded, particularly under Pope Leo I, 440 to 461 AD. Leo articulated the theory of papal primacy in correspondence with other bishops and secular rulers. His 452 AD negotiation with Attila the Hun, traditionally credited with persuading the invaders to spare Rome, exemplified the Church's role as both spiritual and temporal authority. Leo's Tome of Leo, presented at the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD, addressed Christological debates, affirming the doctrine of two natures in Christ, fully human and fully divine, an essential moment in doctrinal history. Throughout this period, the Church also became a preserver of Roman culture and literacy. Monasteries, episcopal schools, and scriptoria copied texts, maintained libraries, and educated clergy and laity. Latin and Greek literatures, law codes, and biblical manuscripts were preserved and transmitted by ecclesiastical institutions, laying the foundation for Western intellectual continuity. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD marked a turning point politically, but did not diminish the Church's authority. Odoacer's deposition of the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, left a power vacuum in Italy. The Bishop of Rome, already a central religious figure, assumed greater responsibility for civic leadership, administration, and diplomacy. The Church maintained stability through a combination of moral authority, organizational structure, and the ability to mediate between competing political factions, foreshadowing its central role in medieval European governance. The Imperial Church also engaged in missionary activities during this period. Christian communities in Gaul, Spain, North Africa, and the eastern provinces expanded, often facilitated by episcopal networks and the establishment of sees in major cities. Catechetical instruction, baptism, Eucharist celebrations, and moral guidance reinforced community cohesion and doctrinal uniformity. Persecutions were rare after 313 AD, but theological controversies, such as Arianism, Pelagianism, and Nestorian tendencies, required continuous attention, resolved through councils, letters, and papal guidance. The role of women and lay members evolved as well. Devout women founded monastic communities, engaged in charitable works, and contributed to scriptural preservation. Lay catechists participated in the teaching and sacramental life of local churches, ensuring the transmission of faith in both urban and rural settings. Christian burial practices, including catacombs and commemorations of martyrs, became standard, reflecting the Church's growing influence in daily life and culture. By 476 AD, the Roman Catholic Church had emerged as a complex, hierarchical institution. Bishops, led by the Pope, administered dioceses and ensured doctrinal unity. Councils defined theology, resolved heresies, and standardized liturgy. Imperial support, particularly under Constantine and Theodosius, provided legal and material resources, while the fall of the Western Empire positioned the Church as the central authority in the West. Christianity, once persecuted, now had the infrastructure, leadership, and theological clarity to endure and expand, setting the stage for its pivotal role in the medieval period. The period from 476 AD to 800 AD saw the Roman Catholic Church emerge as the primary institution preserving order, knowledge, and governance in the Western world after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. In 476 AD, Odoacer deposed Romulus Augustulus, marking the formal end of imperial rule in the West. The resulting political vacuum left Italian territories fragmented, with local aristocrats, warlords, and Germanic tribes competing for power. The Church, centered in Rome, assumed a stabilizing role, providing continuity of administration, social order, and moral authority in the absence of a central secular government. The Bishop of Rome, or Pope, increasingly functioned not only as a spiritual leader but also as a temporal authority. Popes organized the defense of cities, mediated disputes between local rulers, and managed resources for civic welfare. The Church's ability to maintain order was closely tied to its hierarchical structure, rooted in the apostolic tradition, with bishops overseeing dioceses, presbyters administering sacraments, and deacons handling charitable works. Monasticism became a central element of the Church's influence during this period. In 529 AD, Benedict of Nursia, c. 480 to 547 AD, founded the monastery at Monte Cassino in Italy and authored the Rule of Saint Benedict. This text codified monastic life, emphasizing obedience, stability, communal living, and labor combined with prayer. Benedictine monasticism spread rapidly across Italy and beyond, establishing monasteries as centers of education, manuscript preservation, agricultural innovation, and social assistance. Monasteries became repositories of classical and Christian texts, preserving Latin literature, biblical manuscripts, and early patristic writings, which were crucial for transmitting knowledge to subsequent generations. Missionary activity expanded significantly in this period. Pope Gregory I, also known as Gregory the Great, 590 to 604 AD, organized missions to convert Germanic peoples in Europe. One of the most notable efforts was the mission of Augustine of Canterbury, who arrived in Anglo-Saxon England in 597 AD with a group of monks and clergy. Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury and established the framework for the English Church, including the consecration of bishops, the organization of dioceses, and the introduction of Roman liturgical practices. His mission reflected the Church's ability to integrate new regions into its hierarchical and doctrinal system while respecting local cultures. The Church's temporal influence further increased with the establishment of the Papal States. In 755 AD, Pepin the Short, king of the Franks, granted lands in central Italy to the Pope, creating a secular territory governed by the Church. This grant, known as the Donation of Pepin, provided the papacy with financial resources and political independence, allowing popes to exercise authority over both religious and civic matters. The Papal States became the foundation for centuries of papal involvement in European politics and diplomacy. During this period, the Church also played a critical role in education and literacy. Monasteries and cathedral schools taught Latin literacy, biblical exegesis, and theological reasoning, ensuring the continuation of intellectual traditions in a time of political instability. Manuscripts copied in monastic scriptoria preserved not only Christian texts, but also classical Roman and Greek works. This intellectual preservation contributed to the survival of legal, philosophical, and scientific knowledge that might otherwise have been lost during the early medieval period. The relationship between the Church and emerging European rulers was mutually reinforcing. The Franks, under the leadership of figures such as Clovis I, reigned 481 to 511 AD, converted to Nicene Christianity, consolidating political power and legitimizing rule through church endorsement. Subsequent Frankish rulers maintained close ties with the papacy, providing military protection and support for missionary work. These alliances established a model of cooperation between secular rulers and the Church, balancing political authority with spiritual oversight. Throughout this era, the Church maintained continuity in doctrine and practice despite regional diversity and political upheaval. Liturgical uniformity, adherence to creeds established at Nicaea, 325 AD, and Constantinople, 381 AD, and centralized episcopal authority ensured that Christianity remained cohesive. Bishops played an active role in adjudicating disputes, teaching doctrine, and overseeing moral and social conduct within their dioceses. The consolidation of episcopal authority under the Pope reinforced the idea of a universal church guided by apostolic succession. Cultural and artistic expressions also reflected the Church's influence. Churches and basilicas were constructed with attention to architectural and decorative detail, incorporating Christian symbolism into public spaces. Religious art, illuminated manuscripts, and liturgical music served both devotional and educational purposes, transmitting biblical narratives and reinforcing doctrinal understanding. The culmination of this period occurred on December 25, 800 AD, when Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne, king of the Franks, as emperor of the Romans. This event symbolized the synthesis of church and empire in Western Europe. The coronation was both a recognition of Charlemagne's political authority and an assertion of papal prerogative to confer imperial legitimacy. The act reinforced the notion that secular power was subject to moral and spiritual guidance from the Church, establishing a precedent for centuries of interaction between emperors and popes. During 476 AD, 800 AD, the Church's expansion into missionary activity, education, social administration, and monastic development solidified its role as the central institution in Western Europe. Monasteries and episcopal centers preserved knowledge, provided humanitarian aid, and guided ethical behavior, ensuring stability amidst political fragmentation. Missionaries integrated newly converted regions into the Christian fold, spreading Roman liturgical practice, moral teachings, and episcopal oversight. By 800 AD, the Roman Catholic Church had transitioned from a persecuted minority to a dominant religious and socio-political institution in the West. Its hierarchical organization, theological coherence, monastic infrastructure, and diplomatic reach allowed it to function as the primary guardian of civilization during a period marked by political collapse, warfare, and cultural transformation. The coronation of Charlemagne represented the culmination of this era, formalizing the partnership between church and empire and setting the stage for the medieval structure of European Christendom. The period from 800 AD to 1054 AD marked the consolidation of church authority in the context of emerging European kingdoms and the formal development of the Holy Roman Empire. Following the coronation of Charlemagne by Pope Leo III on December 25, 800 AD, the papacy and the Carolingian emperors established a complex and sometimes tense relationship, balancing spiritual authority with political power. Charlemagne's empire, stretching across much of Western and Central Europe, relied on the church for administrative support, moral legitimacy, and cultural cohesion. The Carolingian Renaissance, initiated under Charlemagne, reigned 768 to 814 AD, strengthened the church's role in education, literacy, and governance. Monastic schools and cathedral schools flourished, emphasizing Latin literacy, theological instruction, and the preservation of classical texts. This period saw the standardization of liturgical practices and the refinement of canon law, enabling the Church to administer justice, enforce moral norms, and maintain religious uniformity across diverse regions. Bishops and abbots served as local administrators, providing education, legal oversight, and social welfare. Following Charlemagne, the Western Empire experienced fragmentation and instability, especially during the 9th and 10th centuries. The so-called Saeculum Obscurum, or Dark Age, refers to the period of papal vulnerability in Rome, during which aristocratic families exerted significant influence over the selection of popes. Despite these political challenges, the papacy maintained doctrinal authority and sought to assert its independence from secular interference, a goal that would come to the fore in the 11th century. In the early 11th century, the Gregorian Reform, initiated under Pope Gregory VII, 1073 to 1085 AD, represented a systematic effort to strengthen church autonomy and moral authority. Gregory VII addressed issues such as simony, the sale of ecclesiastical offices, clerical marriage, and lay investiture, the practice by which secular rulers appointed bishops. The reformers emphasized that spiritual authority derived directly from God, not from temporal rulers, laying the foundation for the Church's claim to independence in ecclesiastical appointments. The investiture controversy exemplified the tension between papal authority and imperial power. Emperor Henry IV of the Holy Roman Empire challenged papal decrees restricting lay investiture, leading to a confrontation that peaked in 1077 AD at Canossa. In this event, Henry IV traveled to the castle of Canossa and performed penance before Pope Gregory VII, seeking absolution to regain imperial legitimacy. The controversy highlighted the Church's increasing ability to influence secular rulers and reinforced the principle that spiritual authority could constrain temporal power, a precedent that would shape European politics for centuries. The period also saw the development of canon law as a formal system. The Church codified legal principles governing doctrine, clerical behavior, and moral conduct, providing a standardized framework for adjudicating disputes and maintaining internal cohesion. Bishops and ecclesiastical courts exercised authority over clergy and laity alike, addressing matters ranging from heresy to contractual obligations. This legal infrastructure strengthened the Church's ability to govern large, diverse populations, reinforcing both its spiritual and temporal influence. Relations between the Western Church and the Eastern Church became increasingly strained during this period. Cultural, linguistic, and theological differences contributed to misunderstandings and conflicts over ecclesiastical authority. The Filioque Clause, added to the Nicene Creed in the West, asserted that the Holy Spirit proceeds from both the Father and the Son, a theological point rejected by the Eastern Church. Disputes over liturgical practices, clerical celibacy, and the authority of the Pope versus the Patriarch of Constantinople exacerbated tensions. These differences culminated in the Great Schism of 1054 AD, formally dividing Christianity into Western, Latin, and Eastern Orthodox branches. The schism was precipitated by mutual excommunications between Pope Leo IX and Patriarch Michael I Cerularius. While doctrinal disagreements, including the Filioque and issues of papal primacy, played a central role, political and cultural factors, such as the competing ambitions of Rome and Constantinople, also influenced the split. The schism established two separate ecclesiastical hierarchies, each with distinct liturgical, theological, and administrative traditions, shaping the trajectory of Christianity in Europe and the Near East. During this period, the Church expanded missionary activities beyond the former territories of the Carolingian Empire. Monastic and episcopal networks supported missions to Scandinavia, Central Europe, and the Slavic regions. Figures such as Saint Ansgar, c. 801 to 865 AD, known as the Apostle of the North, evangelized Denmark and Sweden, establishing churches and diocesan structures. These efforts reflected the Church's commitment to spreading Christian belief while integrating local political structures into its ecclesiastical framework. Monasticism continued to play a pivotal role in cultural and social life. Benedictine monasteries functioned as centers of learning, agricultural innovation, and charitable activity. They preserved classical and Christian texts, trained clergy, and maintained libraries. Monastic scribes copied biblical manuscripts, patristic works, and legal documents, ensuring continuity of intellectual life. The rule of Saint Benedict remained the foundation for monastic discipline, emphasizing prayer, labor, and communal responsibility. The Church's influence extended to art, architecture, and liturgical practice. Romanesque architectural elements began to appear in church construction, characterized by stone vaulting, semicircular arches, and massive walls. Liturgical practices were standardized, with uniformity in sacraments, worship, and the observance of holy days reinforcing a cohesive religious culture across Europe. Religious art and iconography served as educational tools, depicting biblical narratives and saintly lives for largely illiterate populations. Socially, the Church acted as a stabilizing force in a fragmented Europe. It provided guidance on ethical behavior, organized charitable relief for the poor and sick, and mediated disputes among rulers and local communities. The episcopal hierarchy ensured accountability and maintained doctrinal orthodoxy, with the Pope as the ultimate arbiter in theological, disciplinary, and moral matters. By 1054 AD, the Roman Catholic Church had achieved a central position in Western Europe. Its authority spanned spiritual, legal, and cultural domains. The papacy had asserted its independence from secular rulers, codified canonical law, expanded missionary activity, and maintained doctrinal cohesion. The Great Schism formalized a division that clarified the boundaries between Western and Eastern Christianity, setting the stage for the Church's medieval prominence as both a religious and political institution. The period from 1054 AD to 1300 AD saw the Roman Catholic Church assert its authority across both religious and temporal spheres while responding to political, theological, and military challenges. Following the Great Schism of 1054 AD, the division between the Western Latin Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church solidified. The papacy sought to reinforce its spiritual authority, consolidate territories, and address external threats, while also regulating internal doctrine and discipline. One of the most significant developments during this era was the call for the First Crusade. In 1095 AD, Pope Urban II convened the Council of Clermont in France, urging Western European nobles to assist Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos in reclaiming territory in Anatolia from Muslim control. Urban II framed the expedition as a penitential act, granting spiritual merit to participants, promising remission of sins for those who joined. The First Crusade, 1096 to 1099 AD, culminated in the capture of Jerusalem in 1099 AD, establishing the Kingdom of Jerusalem and several Crusader states, including Edessa and Antioch. Subsequent crusades, throughout the 12th and 13th centuries, sought to defend or expand Christian holdings in the Holy Land, although many ended in military failure or limited territorial gain. During this period, the Church also witnessed the formation of new religious and military orders. The Knights Templar, founded in 1119 AD, served as a monastic military order protecting pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Similarly, the Knights Hospitaller, originally established to provide care for pilgrims in Jerusalem, became a significant military force. The Teutonic Order, founded in 1190 AD during the Third Crusade, expanded its influence in the Baltic region, supporting missionary activity and territorial control. These orders demonstrated the Church's integration of spiritual, military, and administrative functions, emphasizing the defense of Christendom and the protection of religious interests abroad. Papal authority continued to expand during the pontificate of Pope Innocent III, 1198 to 1216 AD. Innocent III convened the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 AD, a major ecclesiastical assembly that defined key doctrines, reinforced clerical discipline, and regulated lay participation. The council addressed the sacraments, including baptism, Eucharist, penance, and marriage, establishing standardized procedures and theological interpretation. It also legislated against heresy, set rules for clergy, and codified obligations for lay people, consolidating the Church's moral and administrative authority. Canon law developed significantly in this period, culminating in Gratian's Decretum, circa 1140 AD. Gratian, a jurist and monk, compiled existing papal decrees, council canons, and ecclesiastical legal precedents into a coherent legal system, providing a framework for resolving theological, moral, and disciplinary disputes. The Decretum became a foundational text for canon law, influencing ecclesiastical courts and shaping the governance of the Church for centuries. The Church also instituted mechanisms for combating heresy. The Inquisition, established in the 1230s AD under Pope Gregory IX, targeted groups deemed heretical, including the Cathars in southern France and other dissident movements. Inquisitors conducted investigations, trials, and corrective measures to enforce doctrinal orthodoxy, using both persuasion and coercion within the bounds of contemporary legal practices. This institutionalization of orthodoxy reinforced the Church's authority and maintained theological cohesion across diverse regions. Scholastic theology flourished during this period. Thinkers such as Peter Abelard, 1079 to 1142 AD, and Thomas Aquinas, 1225 to 1274 AD, synthesized faith and reason, employing Aristotelian logic to articulate systematic theology. Aquinas' Summa Theologica provided a comprehensive treatment of God, Christ, morality, and sacraments, becoming a central text for teaching and doctrinal reference in universities and ecclesiastical schools. Scholasticism reflected the Church's intellectual maturity and its commitment to rigorous theological inquiry while maintaining orthodoxy. Monastic and educational institutions continued to thrive. Benedictine, Cistercian, and Augustinian monasteries provided centers of learning, manuscript preservation, and agricultural development. Universities such as Paris, Bologna, Oxford, and Cambridge emerged under ecclesiastical sponsorship, offering instruction in theology, law, medicine, and philosophy. These institutions trained clergy, administrators, and scholars, contributing to the Church's cultural and intellectual influence across Europe. The Church's social and political reach extended through relationships with secular rulers. Popes mediated disputes between monarchs, endorsed legitimate succession, and provided moral guidance for governance. Papal diplomacy, including the use of legates and envoys, allowed the Church to exert influence over distant territories. The papacy also engaged in regulating economic practices, overseeing tithes, and ensuring compliance with ecclesiastical obligations, reinforcing its central role in European life. Art, architecture, and liturgy evolved during this period as expressions of religious devotion and ecclesiastical authority. Romanesque and early Gothic architecture characterized church construction, incorporating vaulting, spires, stained glass, and sculptural decoration. Liturgical music, including Gregorian chant, provided a standardized form of worship, while visual art depicted biblical narratives, saints, and ecclesiastical ideals, educating the largely illiterate population and reinforcing doctrinal understanding. Missionary activity remained integral to church expansion. Clergy, monks, and religious orders evangelized regions in Scandinavia, Central Europe, and the Baltic, converting pagan populations and establishing dioceses. Missionary work was closely linked to political developments, as conversion often facilitated alliances with rulers and integration of territories into the ecclesiastical hierarchy. Saints such as Ansgar, c. 801 to 865 AD, in Scandinavia, and Saint Vladimir in Kievan Rus, baptized 988 AD, exemplified this integration of spiritual and temporal influence. Though the primary missionary expansion into Eastern Europe continued through the 12th and 13th centuries, by 1300 AD, the Church had established itself as a central authority across Western Europe, combining spiritual, intellectual, legal, and military functions. Papal authority had been asserted and reinforced through councils, canon law, and diplomatic engagement. Military orders protected Christian territories, missionary activity spread the faith, and scholastic thought provided intellectual rigor. Liturgical, artistic, and educational developments reinforced cultural cohesion, while administrative structures ensured governance and discipline across diverse populations. This era, marked by the Crusades, the development of canon law, scholasticism, and papal centralization, solidified the Church's role as the dominant institution in medieval Europe. By integrating spiritual guidance with political influence, education, legal authority, and cultural production, the Roman Catholic Church became indispensable to the functioning of European society, shaping the religious, social, and political landscape for the centuries to follow. The period from 1200 AD to 1453 AD represents a time of intellectual, cultural, and institutional consolidation for the Roman Catholic Church. Following the Crusades and the establishment of ecclesiastical authority across Europe, the Church faced new challenges in governance, doctrine, and education. This era witnessed the flourishing of scholastic theology, the rise of universities, efforts to combat heresy, and the institutional crises of the Avignon papacy and the Western Schism. It also coincided with the geopolitical transformations culminating in the fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD, which reshaped Christendom and the Church's global orientation. Universities emerged as critical centers of learning, often under Church sponsorship. The University of Paris, Oxford, Bologna, and Cambridge offered instruction in theology, philosophy, law, and medicine. These institutions trained clergy, administrators, and scholars, fostering intellectual rigor that complemented the Church's doctrinal authority. Theology was central to the curriculum, and scholasticism, an intellectual movement combining faith and reason, dominated academic discourse. Scholastic theologians sought to reconcile Christian belief with classical philosophy, particularly the works of Aristotle, which had been reintroduced to Europe via Arabic translations. Figures such as Albert the Great, circa 1200 to 1280 AD, and Thomas Aquinas, 1225 to 1274 AD, developed systematic approaches to theology, ethics, and metaphysics. Aquinas' Summa Theologica provided a comprehensive treatment of God, creation, morality, and the sacraments, serving as a cornerstone for Catholic education and ecclesiastical guidance for centuries. During this period, the Church also confronted various heretical movements that challenged its authority. The Cathars in southern France, known for their dualistic beliefs and rejection of material creation, prompted a military and religious response. The Albigensian Crusade, 1209 to 1229 AD, sanctioned by the papacy, sought to suppress Catharism through a combination of military campaigns and ecclesiastical measures. In parallel, inquisitorial procedures were formalized to identify, adjudicate, and correct heretical beliefs, reinforcing doctrinal conformity and the Church's moral authority. The Avignon papacy, 1309 to 1377 AD, represented a significant institutional shift. Popes resided in Avignon, France, rather than Rome, largely due to political instability and influence from the French crown. While the papacy retained spiritual authority, this relocation exposed the Church to perceptions of secular manipulation and weakened its independence. Following the return to Rome, the Western Schism, 1378 to 1417 AD, emerged, with multiple claimants to the papal throne. Rival popes in Rome and Avignon divided allegiances among European kingdoms, causing confusion and undermining ecclesiastical cohesion. The Council of Constance, 1414 to 1418 AD, resolved the schism, ending competing claims and electing Pope Martin V in 1417 AD, thereby restoring centralized papal authority and reinforcing the Church's hierarchical structure. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD to the Ottoman Turks marked the definitive end of the Eastern Roman Empire and reshaped Christian geopolitics. The loss of the Byzantine capital not only ended the political and cultural continuity of Eastern Christendom, but also redirected European attention to the Mediterranean and beyond, prompting efforts to strengthen ecclesiastical unity, expand missionary activity, and safeguard Christendom against external threats. The Roman Catholic Church, as the central authority in the West, assumed increased responsibility for religious and cultural leadership amidst this changing landscape. Monasticism and intellectual life continued to flourish. Orders such as the Benedictines, Cistercians, and Franciscans maintained centers of learning, manuscript preservation, and theological debate. Monks and scholars copied classical and biblical texts, safeguarding knowledge that would later support the Renaissance. Franciscan scholars, including Bonaventure, 1221 to 1274 AD, combined mystical theology with rigorous academic study, demonstrating the integration of devotional practice and intellectual inquiry. These developments reinforced the Church's dual role as spiritual guide and custodian of learning. The Church's influence extended to political and social spheres. Popes mediated disputes between secular rulers, endorsed legitimate claims to thrones, and provided moral guidance in governance. Ecclesiastical courts adjudicated disputes involving clergy, nobility, and laity, ensuring adherence to canon law. Tithes and ecclesiastical taxation supported church infrastructure, charitable activity, and education, reinforcing its presence in daily life. Liturgical uniformity, adherence to creeds, and sacramental practice maintained cohesion across geographically and culturally diverse regions. Art, architecture, and liturgy reflected the Church's authority and cultural influence. Gothic architecture, emerging in the 12th century, spread across Europe, characterized by pointed arches, flying buttresses, ribbed vaults, and stained glass. Cathedrals such as Notre Dame de Paris and Chartres served as centers for worship, education, and civic identity. Liturgical music, including Gregorian chant and later polyphonic forms, standardized worship and communicated theological narratives to largely illiterate populations. Religious art, illuminated manuscripts, and iconography reinforced doctrinal understanding and shaped devotional practices. Missionary activity remained a focus. The Church expanded its reach into Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, and parts of the Baltic, converting pagan populations and integrating them into diocesan structures. Saints, bishops, and monastic missionaries provided education, organized ecclesiastical governance, and facilitated cultural integration. This missionary effort was closely aligned with political developments, as conversion often legitimized rulers and strengthened ties between church and state. Socially, the Church functioned as a stabilizing force in a period of political fragmentation, warfare, and shifting alliances. Charitable works, care for the poor and sick, and educational initiatives reinforced its role as a central institution. Monasteries served as safe havens, centers of productivity, and hubs of intellectual activity. Bishops and clergy provided guidance on ethical conduct, reinforced moral norms, and mediated conflicts, ensuring societal cohesion and the transmission of Christian values. By 1453 AD, The Roman Catholic Church had established itself as a comprehensive institution encompassing spiritual authority, intellectual leadership, social administration, and cultural influence. It had confronted heresy, managed internal crises, and maintained doctrinal unity. The integration of faith and reason through scholasticism, combined with administrative and educational infrastructure, ensured the Church's centrality in European life. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Byzantine political sphere but underscored the Church's responsibility as the guardian of Western Christendom. The period from 1453 AD to 1648 AD represents a transformative era for the Roman Catholic Church, marked by internal reform, the Protestant Reformation, and the Church's response to theological, political, and social challenges across Europe. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD to the Ottoman Turks ended the Eastern Roman Empire, leaving the Roman Catholic Church as the dominant ecclesiastical authority in Western Europe. At the same time, the Renaissance brought intellectual and cultural changes that challenged church practices, creating pressures that culminated in widespread reform movements. The Renaissance popes, such as Alexander VI, 1492 to 1503 AD, sought to consolidate both spiritual and temporal power. They engaged in diplomacy, patronized the arts, and exercised influence over European monarchies. However, this period also witnessed corruption, nepotism, and the sale of indulgences, which increasingly drew criticism from both clergy and laity. The sale of indulgences, promising remission of temporal punishment for sins in exchange for money or service, became particularly controversial, undermining the Church's moral authority in the eyes of many. In 1517 AD, Martin Luther, a German Augustinian monk and theology professor, initiated the Protestant Reformation by posting the 95 Theses on the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. Luther objected to the sale of indulgences and other perceived abuses, emphasizing justification by faith alone, sola fide, and the authority of Scripture, sola scriptura. His actions ignited widespread religious debate and inspired reform movements across Germany, Switzerland, and Scandinavia. Reformers such as Huldrych Zwingli in Zurich and John Calvin in Geneva expanded the theological critique, advocating for congregational governance, simplified liturgy, and stricter moral discipline. The Reformation fractured Western Christendom, resulting in a variety of Protestant denominations and challenging the Roman Catholic Church's spiritual and political dominance. The Church responded to the Reformation through the Counter-Reformation, a movement aimed at doctrinal clarification, institutional reform, and missionary expansion. The Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563 AD, played a central role in this process. Convened intermittently over 18 years, the council addressed theological disputes, clarified Catholic doctrine, reformed clerical practices, and strengthened episcopal oversight. Key doctrinal reaffirmations included the seven sacraments, transubstantiation in the Eucharist, the authority of both Scripture and church tradition, and the necessity of faith and works for salvation. The council also imposed stricter standards for clergy, addressing corruption, moral lapses, and inadequate education, thereby restoring internal discipline and reinforcing the Church's moral authority. The Society of Jesus, or Jesuits, founded by Ignatius of Loyola in 1540 AD, became instrumental in implementing the Counter-Reformation. Jesuits focused on education, missionary work, and the defense of Catholic doctrine. They established schools, colleges, and universities across Europe, emphasizing rigorous scholarship and spiritual formation. Jesuit missionaries, including Francis Xavier, 1506 to 1552 AD, evangelized in India, Japan, and Southeast Asia, extending the reach of the Church and countering Protestant expansion abroad. Religious conflict extended into political and military arenas. Wars of religion in France, the Holy Roman Empire, and England reflected the entanglement of theological disputes with dynastic and territorial ambitions. In England, King Henry VIII, reigned 1509 to 1547 AD, broke with Rome in 1534 AD, establishing the Church of England with the monarch as its supreme head. This schism, though political in origin, had lasting theological and ecclesiastical consequences, leading to the English Reformation and the eventual development of Anglicanism. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648 AD, epitomized the religious, political, and territorial conflicts of the era. Initially sparked by disputes between Protestant and Catholic states within the Holy Roman Empire, the war expanded into a broader European struggle involving France, Spain, Sweden, and the Habsburg monarchy. The Roman Catholic Church played a central role in supporting Catholic rulers and consolidating religious territories. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 AD ended the war, recognizing the coexistence of Catholic and Protestant states within Europe and establishing principles of religious tolerance and state sovereignty. While the peace curtailed the Church's direct political influence in certain regions, it solidified the territorial boundaries of Catholic and Protestant domains, shaping the religious map of Europe for generations. During this period, the Church also maintained global missionary expansion. The Age of Exploration, beginning in the late 15th century, provided opportunities for evangelization in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Spanish and Portuguese missionaries, often accompanying colonial expeditions, sought to convert indigenous populations and establish ecclesiastical structures. Jesuit reductions in Paraguay and missions in Brazil, Mexico, and the Philippines exemplified organized evangelization, combining religious instruction with social organization. These missions reinforced the Church's international presence and underscored its adaptability in diverse cultural contexts. Art, architecture, and education reflected the Church's response to reform and expansion. Baroque art emerged as a visual and emotional instrument to inspire devotion and convey Catholic ideals. Churches, chapels, and altarpieces commissioned by popes, bishops, and religious orders communicated theological narratives, reinforcing doctrinal orthodoxy and appealing to the faithful. Educational initiatives, particularly Jesuit schools, emphasized classical learning, moral discipline, and theological instruction, contributing to the Church's intellectual authority and shaping future clergy and lay leaders. Canon law continued to develop, providing legal frameworks for governance, discipline, and doctrinal enforcement. Ecclesiastical courts adjudicated disputes among clergy and laity, ensuring adherence to Church teachings and reinforcing hierarchical authority. The codification of canon law during this period, influenced by Tridentine reforms, strengthened internal cohesion and facilitated administration across increasingly complex diocesan and missionary networks. Socially, the Church remained central to everyday life. Parishes provided pastoral care, sacraments, and moral instruction. Monasteries and religious orders continued to offer charity, education, and health care, particularly for the poor, sick, and orphaned. The integration of religious, social, and educational functions ensured that the Church retained legitimacy and influence, even in regions challenged by Protestantism or political upheaval. By 1648 AD, the Roman Catholic Church had undergone a significant transformation. It had confronted internal corruption, addressed the theological challenges of the Reformation, and reasserted its doctrinal and moral authority through the Council of Trent. It had expanded its global missionary presence, integrated education and scholarship into its institutional framework, and maintained social and spiritual services for the faithful. The Church emerged from this period as both a reformed and more disciplined institution, prepared to navigate the complex political, intellectual, and religious landscape of early modern Europe. This era of crisis and reformation laid the foundations for the Church's global orientation, institutional consolidation, and intellectual engagement. The Counter-Reformation, Tridentine reforms, Jesuit missions, and educational expansion ensured that Catholicism remained a dynamic and resilient force, capable of responding to internal challenges and external pressures. The events of 1453 AD, 1648 AD not only redefined the Church's internal structures, but also established enduring patterns for its interaction with states, societies, and cultures worldwide. The period from 1500 AD to 1789 AD marked the Roman Catholic Church's transformation into a truly global institution. Building on the foundations of the Counter-Reformation, the Church expanded missionary activity, strengthened education, and adapted to new political and intellectual challenges across Europe and the wider world. This era coincided with European exploration, colonization, and the rise of global trade networks, which created unprecedented opportunities for evangelization and cultural influence. Missionary activity became a central feature of the Church's global presence. The Society of Jesus, or Jesuits, played a pivotal role in these efforts. Francis Xavier, 1506 to 1552 AD, one of the first Jesuit missionaries, traveled to India, Japan, and parts of Southeast Asia, establishing Christian communities, schools, and catechetical programs. In India, he worked along the western coast, particularly in Goa, converting local populations and training clergy. In Japan, he engaged with feudal authorities to gain permission for mission work, establishing the first sustained Christian communities. Jesuits emphasized cultural adaptation, learning local languages, and engaging with indigenous customs to facilitate evangelization while maintaining doctrinal fidelity. The Portuguese and Spanish empires provided platforms for Catholic expansion in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. In the Americas, missionaries sought to convert indigenous populations, establish parishes, and provide education. The Jesuit reductions in Paraguay, beginning in the early 17th century, exemplified organized mission communities where indigenous people were taught Christianity, literacy, and European crafts under Jesuit supervision. These reductions functioned as autonomous settlements combining religious instruction, economic self-sufficiency, and protection from colonial exploitation. Similar missionary systems were implemented in Brazil, Mexico, Peru, and the Philippines, integrating Catholic ritual and education into colonial administration. The Church's global influence was not limited to evangelization. Education and intellectual development remained central. Jesuit colleges and universities proliferated across Europe and overseas territories, offering instruction in theology, philosophy, science, and the humanities. These institutions trained clergy, administrators, and laity, fostering intellectual and cultural cohesion within the expanding Catholic world. The Jesuits emphasized rigorous scholarship, moral formation, and practical training, ensuring that Catholicism maintained cultural as well as spiritual authority. The Church also faced significant challenges from emerging intellectual currents, including the Enlightenment. Enlightenment thinkers questioned traditional authority, promoted reason, and emphasized secular governance. Monarchies in France, Spain, and Portugal occasionally suppressed Jesuits and other religious orders, seeking to assert state control over education and missionary activities. Despite these challenges, the Church adapted by emphasizing its global mission, education, and charitable activity, demonstrating resilience in the face of ideological and political pressures. Art, architecture, and liturgy flourished as expressions of Catholic identity and authority. Baroque art and architecture, prominent during the 17th and 18th centuries, sought to inspire devotion and convey theological ideas. Churches were constructed with elaborate altarpieces, frescoes, and sculptures designed to engage the faithful and communicate doctrinal narratives visually. Liturgical music, including compositions by figures such as Palestrina, 1525 to 1594 AD, standardized worship practices and reinforced the Church's spiritual and cultural authority. These artistic and liturgical developments complemented the Church's educational and missionary endeavors, integrating aesthetic and doctrinal instruction. Political engagement remained a key feature of Church activity. Catholic monarchies in Europe often collaborated with the papacy, aligning religious and political interests. At the same time, the Church negotiated with states over issues such as episcopal appointments, taxation, and jurisdiction. Papal diplomacy extended to colonial territories, where ecclesiastical authorities mediated conflicts, oversaw missionary activities, and ensured adherence to canon law. This integration of spiritual and temporal authority reinforced the Church's centrality in global affairs. Canon law continued to evolve, providing a framework for governance, legal adjudication, and doctrinal enforcement across diverse regions. Ecclesiastical courts addressed disputes involving clergy, laity, and colonial authorities, ensuring consistency in the application of church law. The codification and dissemination of legal principles facilitated the administration of sacraments, property, and religious obligations in both European and overseas contexts. Missionary success often required cultural negotiation. Jesuits and other orders adopted local languages, customs, and practices to varying degrees while maintaining adherence to Catholic doctrine. In China, Matteo Ricci, 1552 to 1610 AD, engaged Confucian scholars, integrating Christian teaching with Chinese intellectual traditions, an approach later complicated by the Vatican's decisions regarding rights and adaptation. In the Americas and Africa, missionaries contended with diverse social structures, political systems, and religious beliefs, balancing evangelization with respect for indigenous customs, education, and welfare. By 1789 AD, the Roman Catholic Church had established a global network encompassing Europe, the Americas, Asia, and parts of Africa. Its influence spanned spiritual, educational, legal, and cultural domains. Missionary activity, particularly through the Jesuits, expanded the Church's reach and integrated local communities into ecclesiastical structures. Education, art, and liturgy reinforced doctrinal cohesion and cultural identity. Canon law and episcopal governance maintained internal discipline and facilitated the administration of sacraments, clergy, and missionary territories. Socially, the Church continued to provide charity, healthcare, and education. Monastic communities, religious orders, and diocesan structures ensured that local populations had access to spiritual guidance, literacy, and vocational training. These services strengthened the Church's moral authority and reinforced its central role in daily life, even as secular and political challenges increased during the late 18th century. The period also set the stage for the challenges posed by the French Revolution and Enlightenment-era secularism. The Church's engagement with global expansion, intellectual development, and political negotiation prepared it to navigate the profound upheavals that would arise in the late 18th and 19th centuries. By the end of the 18th century, the Roman Catholic Church had achieved unprecedented global reach, institutional complexity, and cultural integration, positioning itself as a central religious authority capable of responding to diverse social, political, and spiritual challenges. The period from 1789 to 1870 was a time of profound political, social, and religious transformation for the Roman Catholic Church. It coincided with the French Revolution, the Napoleonic era, and the rise of nationalist movements across Europe, all of which challenged the Church's temporal authority and redefined its relationship with emerging modern states. The French Revolution, which began in 1789 AD, posed the most immediate and radical threat to the Church's position in European society. Revolutionary leaders sought to secularize governance, redistribute property, and diminish the influence of religion in public life. In 1790 AD, the National Assembly enacted the Civil Constitution of the Clergy, which subordinated the French clergy to the state, required an oath of loyalty to the revolutionary government, and confiscated church lands. Bishops and priests who refused the oath, known as refractory clergy, were persecuted or forced into exile. The Church's spiritual authority was directly challenged, and its resources were dramatically curtailed. During the radical phase of the Revolution, the government attempted to replace Catholic worship with the cult of reason and the cult of the supreme being, promoting secularized civic religion. Churches were closed, relics and treasures were destroyed or repurposed, and clergy faced imprisonment or execution. The persecution of the Church under the revolutionary government extended to priests, monastic orders, and lay faithful who resisted these reforms. Despite these pressures, underground networks of clergy and laity maintained Catholic practice, highlighting the resilience and adaptability of the Church in times of crisis. The rise of Napoleon Bonaparte brought a complex reconfiguration of church-state relations. In 1801 AD, Napoleon negotiated the Concordat with Pope Pius VII, which recognized Catholicism as the religion of the majority of French citizens while maintaining state control over certain aspects of church governance, such as the appointment of bishops. This agreement restored many rights to the Church, allowed for public worship, and reinstated clergy salaries, but also reflected the limits of papal authority in the face of a powerful secular ruler. In 1809 AD, Napoleon annexed the Papal States and took Pope Pius VII prisoner, holding him until 1814 AD, further demonstrating the tensions between temporal power and spiritual authority during this period. The post-Napoleonic era saw the Church rebuilding its institutions and reasserting influence in Europe. The Congress of Vienna, (1814 to 1815), restored much of the papal states to papal control, and European monarchies generally reaffirmed traditional relations with the Church. However, the 19th century also brought new challenges, including liberal revolutions, nationalist movements, and the gradual secularization of education and governance. The Church had to navigate a landscape in which temporal power was increasingly contested, and the authority of monarchs and parliaments often took precedence over ecclesiastical prerogatives. Within this context, the First Vatican Council, 1869 to 1870, became a defining moment for the Church's response to modernity. Convened by Pope Pius IX, 1846 to 1878, the Council addressed questions of doctrinal authority, centralization, and papal primacy. It proclaimed the dogma of papal infallibility in 1870, asserting that the Pope, when speaking ex cathedra on matters of faith and morals, was preserved from error. This declaration reinforced spiritual authority amidst growing political and intellectual challenges, emphasizing the Church's autonomy in matters of doctrine despite the declining influence of the Papal States. The capture of Rome by Italian troops in 1870 AD marked the formal end of the Papal States and a significant temporal loss for the Church. The unification of Italy under King Victor Emmanuel II integrated the central Italian territories into a secular state, leaving the Pope with only Vatican City as an independent enclave following the Lateran Treaty of 1929. Despite this reduction in temporal authority, the Church maintained spiritual and moral influence across Italy and the broader Catholic world. The loss of territorial sovereignty forced the papacy to focus increasingly on spiritual leadership, missionary activity, and global ecclesiastical administration. During this period, the Church also confronted social and industrial transformations across Europe. Rapid urbanization, industrialization, and the rise of secular political ideologies challenged traditional Catholic structures and community life. In response, the Church expanded charitable work, established schools, hospitals, and social institutions, and sought to provide moral guidance in rapidly changing societies. Pope Leo XIII, though later in 1891, would articulate responses to these social challenges in Rerum Novarum, but the foundations for engaging industrial and social upheavals were laid in this revolutionary era. The Church maintained its global missionary presence throughout this period, continuing to evangelize the Americas, Asia, and Africa. Missionaries adapted to political and cultural contexts, often navigating colonial administrations and indigenous societies to spread Catholic teaching. Education remained a central focus, with religious orders establishing schools and seminaries to train clergy capable of responding to both pastoral needs and intellectual challenges posed by the modern world. The global expansion ensured that the Church retained relevance beyond Europe, counterbalancing the loss of temporal power in Italy. The Church remained a patron of art, literature, and education. Religious institutions preserved libraries, promoted scholarship, and maintained liturgical traditions, providing continuity amidst social and political upheavals. Monastic and religious communities continued to serve as centers of learning and social welfare, reinforcing the Church's authority and moral influence even in regions affected by revolution and secularization. By 1870 AD, the Roman Catholic Church had endured one of its most tumultuous periods in history. The challenges of revolution, secularization, and nationalist movements forced the Church to reconsider the balance between temporal and spiritual authority. Through doctrinal reaffirmation, social engagement, education, and missionary work, the Church navigated these challenges and maintained cohesion across Europe and the wider world. The declaration of papal infallibility and the reorganization of ecclesiastical structures ensured that, despite the loss of the papal states, the Church remained a central spiritual and cultural institution with global reach. The period from 1870 to 1914 marked a critical phase in the Roman Catholic Church's adaptation to the rapidly modernizing world. Following the loss of the Papal States in 1870, the Church faced the challenges of industrialization, secularization, nationalism, and social upheaval across Europe and beyond. During these decades, the Church focused on spiritual consolidation, social engagement, education, and the development of international diplomacy, seeking to maintain moral authority and relevance in a world increasingly dominated by secular governments and technological change. The declaration of papal infallibility at the First Vatican Council, 1869 to 1870, by Pope Pius IX, 1846 to 1878, had already defined the Pope's supreme doctrinal authority. In the wake of this declaration, the papacy sought to reinforce spiritual leadership, emphasizing the autonomy of the Church from state interference. The loss of temporal power necessitated a stronger focus on pastoral care, missionary expansion, and doctrinal instruction, allowing the Church to maintain cohesion and authority despite diminished political influence in Italy and parts of Europe. Industrialization fundamentally transformed European societies during this period. Urbanization, technological progress, and the rise of the working class created new social challenges, including poor labor conditions, widespread poverty, and the growth of secular ideologies such as socialism and communism. The Church responded by developing social teaching that emphasized human dignity, ethical labor practices, and the moral responsibilities of employers and governments. Pope Leo XIII, in his encyclical Rerum Novarum, 1891, articulated these principles, addressing the rights of workers, the duties of employers, and the role of the state in ensuring social justice. While slightly later in Chronology, the foundations for this social engagement were established in the late 19th century, reflecting the Church's awareness of its responsibility to engage with modern social realities. Catholic education expanded significantly during this period. Religious orders and diocesan authorities established schools, seminaries, and universities to train clergy and educate laypeople. Institutions emphasized theological instruction, moral formation, and practical knowledge, equipping graduates to navigate both religious and secular spheres. Universities such as the Catholic University of Louvain, founded in 1834, and later global institutions played a crucial role in maintaining intellectual and doctrinal cohesion while fostering dialogue with contemporary science, philosophy, and culture. The Church's global missionary efforts continued to expand during this period. European colonial expansion in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific facilitated missionary work as Catholic missionaries accompanied explorers, settlers, and traders. Missionaries established churches, schools, and hospitals, contributing to social welfare and cultural exchange. In Africa, missionaries worked in regions including modern-day Congo, Nigeria, and Uganda, often interacting with local political structures to gain permission for evangelization. In Asia, missions expanded in China, Japan, and the Philippines, combining evangelization with education and health services. The Church's global presence strengthened its influence and allowed for adaptation to diverse cultural and political contexts. The Church also maintained diplomatic engagement with secular governments to protect the rights of Catholics and promote peace. Apostolic nuncios and papal legates served as intermediaries between the Vatican and national governments, negotiating issues such as religious freedom, education, property rights, and the status of clergy. The Church navigated complex relationships with states that increasingly asserted authority over education, marriage, and public morality, balancing the need for collaboration with the preservation of spiritual and institutional autonomy. Liturgical life and devotional practice continued to shape Catholic communities. The codification of liturgical norms, promotion of catechesis, and standardization of sacramental practice ensured uniformity in worship across diverse regions. Religious festivals, processions, and parish activities reinforced communal identity and provided continuity amidst rapid social and economic change. Monastic and convent communities sustained educational and charitable work, preserving traditional religious structures while adapting to contemporary needs. Intellectual engagement remained a hallmark of this era. Catholic scholars contributed to philosophy, theology, science, and social thought, engaging with secular intellectual currents without compromising doctrinal integrity. The Church encouraged dialogue with contemporary thought, fostering scholarship that reconciled faith with reason, tradition with innovation. Catholic journals, publishing houses, and academic societies disseminated ideas, promoting informed debate and guiding clergy and laity alike in navigating the complexities of modern society. Political challenges were pervasive. Secular governments in France, Germany, Italy, and Spain often enacted laws limiting church influence over education, civil registration, and public administration. The Kulturkampf in Germany, 1871 to 1887 AD, for example, sought to restrict Catholic participation in civil and educational life, regulating clergy appointments, and suppressing religious orders. The Church resisted through diplomatic negotiation, adaptation, and pastoral guidance, emphasizing loyalty to faith while navigating political realities. These tensions highlighted the Church's need to operate within evolving nation-states while maintaining autonomy over spiritual and institutional matters. The late 19th and early 20th centuries also witnessed growing participation of the laity in ecclesiastical and social life. Catholic associations, charitable organizations, and lay confraternities proliferated, providing education, social support, and devotional activities. Lay engagement complemented clerical leadership, reinforcing the Church's social influence and promoting moral and spiritual cohesion within communities facing modernization, urbanization, and industrialization. By 1914, the Roman Catholic Church had established itself as a resilient and adaptive institution in the modernizing world. While no longer exercising temporal authority over large territories, it maintained doctrinal authority, global missionary influence, educational networks, and social services. The Church's engagement with industrial and urban challenges, secular ideologies, and political change ensured its continued relevance and capacity to shape cultural, moral, and spiritual life. The papacy, having redefined its focus from temporal governance to spiritual leadership, remained the central authority for over 1 billion faithful worldwide, capable of guiding clergy and laity alike through a rapidly changing era. The period from 1914 to 1958 was one of profound challenge and transformation for the Roman Catholic Church. It encompassed both World War I and World War II, the interwar years, the rise of totalitarian regimes, and the onset of modern global politics. During this time, the Church navigated unprecedented crises, maintained spiritual and humanitarian missions, and sought to preserve its influence in an increasingly secular and violent world. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 confronted the Church with the immediate need to respond to mass casualties, social upheaval, and political instability across Europe. Pope Benedict XV, 1914 to 1922, took an active role in advocating for peace, issuing numerous appeals to combatants for cessation of hostilities and humanitarian relief. In his August 1, 1914, encyclical Ad Beatissimi Apostolorum, he urged nations to pursue peace and respect human dignity. While his appeals were largely ignored by warring states, the Pope's efforts provided moral leadership and organized Catholic relief initiatives, including hospitals, refugee support, and the distribution of aid to civilians and soldiers affected by the conflict. The Church's humanitarian role expanded further in the post-war period. Pope Benedict XV promoted reconciliation between nations, coordinated international Catholic relief organizations, and engaged in diplomatic efforts to address post-war territorial disputes. The Church also faced the challenge of addressing the spiritual needs of populations traumatized by the war, including veterans, widows, and displaced persons. Ecclesiastical institutions provided pastoral care, education, and charitable services, ensuring the Church remained central to the moral and social reconstruction of Europe. During the interwar years, the Church confronted the rise of totalitarian ideologies, including fascism in Italy, Nazism in Germany, and communism in the Soviet Union. In Italy, Pope Pius XI, 1922 to 1939, negotiated the Lateran Treaty in 1929 with Benito Mussolini, establishing Vatican II as an independent sovereign state and formalizing the Church's legal status within Italy. This agreement restored a degree of temporal sovereignty to the papacy, allowing for greater independence in ecclesiastical governance while delineating boundaries between church and state. The treaty also recognized Catholicism as the state religion of Italy, affirming the Church's cultural and moral influence. Globally, the Church expanded its missionary, educational, and charitable efforts during the interwar period. Catholic missions in Africa, Asia, and the Americas continued to grow, establishing schools, hospitals, and churches. Religious orders focused on education, healthcare, and social welfare, integrating local populations into church structures while maintaining doctrinal integrity. The Church's global presence served as a stabilizing influence, providing spiritual guidance and humanitarian support in regions affected by political instability and economic hardship. The outbreak of World War II in 1939 presented one of the most complex and controversial periods in modern church history. Pope Pius XII, 1939 to 1958, assumed the papacy at the onset of global conflict, facing the challenge of guiding the Church through war, genocide, occupation, and mass displacement. His approach emphasized neutrality in international diplomacy, humanitarian assistance, and the protection of church institutions. Pius XII coordinated relief operations through Catholic charities, provided support to refugees and prisoners, and facilitated the evacuation of thousands of civilians from war zones. The role of Pius XII during the Holocaust remains debated among historians. Records indicate that the Vatican engaged in discreet diplomatic efforts to save Jewish lives, authorized the issuance of protective documents, and offered sanctuary in church institutions. Critics argue that the Pope could have done more publicly to denounce atrocities, while defenders emphasize the strategic constraints imposed by Nazi occupation and the risk to Catholics and others under Axis control. Regardless of debate, the Church's humanitarian efforts extended across Europe, with clergy, religious orders, and lay volunteers assisting countless victims of war and persecution. The Church also faced political pressures in occupied territories. In countries under fascist and Nazi regimes, Catholic clergy and institutions were often targeted for suppression, arrest, or control. The Vatican sought to preserve its religious influence while negotiating with governments to maintain pastoral care and protect its personnel and the faithful. Diplomatic engagement remained a crucial strategy, balancing moral leadership with practical considerations for the safety of Catholics worldwide. In addition to wartime challenges, the Church navigated social and cultural transformations during this period. Industrialization, urbanization, and the spread of secular ideologies influenced the moral and spiritual life of Catholics, particularly in Europe and North America. The Church responded by emphasizing education, moral formation, and social services, ensuring that Catholic identity and ethical teachings remained relevant amidst societal change. Catholic schools, universities, and charitable institutions expanded their reach, integrating faith with practical social engagement. Liturgical, theological, and intellectual development also continued during this period. The Church maintained continuity in sacramental practice, standardized worship, and promoted catechetical instruction. Seminaries and theological faculties trained clergy to address the moral, social, and intellectual challenges of the 20th century. The encyclicals and writings of Pius XI and Pius XII addressed contemporary issues, including secularization, human rights, labor relations, and global conflict, reflecting the Church's commitment to engaging modern realities while preserving doctrinal fidelity. By 1958, at the death of Pope Pius XII, the Roman Catholic Church had emerged from the tumult of two world wars as a global institution with reinforced spiritual authority, extensive humanitarian networks, and an enduring capacity for international diplomacy. Despite criticism and ongoing historical debate regarding its wartime decisions, the Church had maintained its mission of pastoral care, education, and global evangelization. Its hierarchical structure, missionary outreach, and diplomatic engagement ensured continuity and stability in a world reshaped by unprecedented violence and social transformation. The period from 1958 to 2005 represented a pivotal era in the history of the Roman Catholic Church, characterized by institutional renewal, global outreach, and adaptation to rapidly changing social, political, and cultural circumstances. This era began with the papacy of Pope John XXI, 1958 to 1963, who, despite his age, an initial perception as a transitional figure, initiated profound reform that would redefine the Church's relationship with the modern world. One of the most significant developments was the convocation of the Second Vatican Council, formally announced by John XXI on January 25, 1959. The council convened from 1962 to 1965, bringing together over 2,500 bishops from around the world to address contemporary challenges, doctrinal development, and the Church's role in society. The Council's objectives included promoting Christian unity, updating liturgical practices, enhancing the pastoral effectiveness of the Church, and fostering dialogue with the modern world and other religious traditions. Vatican II produced a series of key documents that guided reform and renewal. Lumen Gentium, the dogmatic constitution on the Church, redefined the Church's self-understanding, emphasizing the role of the laity in addition to the clergy. It articulated a vision of the Church as the people of God, participating collectively in Christ's mission, and underscored the hierarchical structure while acknowledging the shared responsibilities of bishops, priests, and lay members. Gaudium et Spes, the pastoral constitution on the Church in the modern world, addressed the Church's engagement with contemporary social, economic, and political issues. It called for the promotion of human dignity, peace, justice, and moral responsibility, reflecting a recognition that the Church's mission extended beyond purely liturgical and doctrinal concerns. Liturgical reform was another central outcome of Vatican II. The Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium, encouraged active participation of the laity, use of local vernacular languages in the Mass, and adaptation of liturgical practices to different cultural contexts. These changes aim to enhance comprehension, engagement, and spiritual participation among the faithful, moving away from rigid Latin-only rituals while maintaining doctrinal integrity. The reforms also encouraged music, art, and architecture that were culturally resonant, emphasizing pastoral effectiveness in worship. Pope Paul VI, 1963 to 1978, oversaw the implementation of Vatican II's reforms, navigating both enthusiasm and resistance within the Church. He promoted collegiality among bishops, encouraged ecumenical dialogue with other Christian denominations, and maintained global missionary initiatives. Under his leadership, the Church emphasized human rights, social justice, and moral guidance, integrating the Council's vision with practical pastoral action. Paul VI also addressed population issues and economic inequality through encyclicals such as Humani Vitae, 1968, reinforcing traditional moral teaching while engaging contemporary debates. The papacy of John Paul I in 1978 was brief, lasting only 33 days, but it reflected continuity in the Council's pastoral vision. His immediate successor, Pope John Paul II, 1978 to 2005, expanded the Church's global outreach, becoming the most traveled pope in history. He visited over 100 countries, reinforcing Catholic identity, fostering interreligious dialogue, and engaging political leaders on issues of peace, human rights, and moral governance. John Paul II played a central role in supporting the collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe, particularly in Poland, highlighting the intersection of spiritual leadership and political influence. During this period, the Church confronted significant global challenges, including secularization, declining religious vocations in Europe, moral controversies, and technological change. Catholic education expanded to address these challenges, with universities, schools, and seminaries promoting both doctrinal fidelity and engagement with contemporary science, philosophy, and social issues. Charitable institutions, hospitals, and relief organizations extended the Church's social mission, addressing poverty, health crises, and humanitarian emergencies worldwide. Interreligious dialogue became increasingly important. Vatican II's Nostra Aetate, the Declaration on the Relation of the Church with Non-Christian Religions, acknowledged the spiritual and moral truths present in other religions, fostering dialogue with Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and other faith traditions. This represented a significant shift from earlier eras, emphasizing understanding, cooperation, and the shared pursuit of human dignity. The Church sought to counter prejudice and promote peace, setting a foundation for collaborative efforts on global humanitarian and moral issues. The period also saw ongoing theological development. Catholic theologians engaged with contemporary philosophy, ethics, and social science, integrating modern knowledge with traditional doctrine. The Church maintained doctrinal clarity on core teachings while promoting discussion on pastoral applications in complex modern contexts. Papal encyclicals addressed issues ranging from economic justice and international law to bioethics and family life, ensuring that the Church's voice remained relevant in public discourse. Globally, Catholicism continued to grow, particularly in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Evangelization, education, and social services contributed to expanding membership, with over 1 billion adherents by the early 21st century. The Church maintained hierarchical governance under the Pope, with diocesan and local structures adapting to cultural and regional contexts while preserving unity of belief and practice. Missionary activity emphasized enculturation, ensuring that local traditions could coexist with Catholic teaching in a manner consistent with doctrine. The Church's engagement with media and communication advanced significantly during this period. Vatican Radio, Catholic publications, and later television broadcasts facilitated the dissemination of teachings, liturgical updates, and papal messages. John Paul II's use of modern media technologies enhanced global influence, enabling direct communication with the faithful and the wider public on a scale previously unattainable. This also reinforced the Church's capacity to address moral and social issues across continents in real time. By 2005, at the death of John Paul II, the Roman Catholic Church had undergone a transformative renewal while preserving core doctrinal continuity. Vatican II and subsequent papacies redefined the Church's role in the modern world, balancing tradition with adaptation. The Church maintained global spiritual authority, social influence, and intellectual engagement, positioning itself as a central moral institution in a rapidly changing and interconnected world. The period from 2005 to the present represents the latest chapter in the history of the Roman Catholic Church, a time of adaptation, reform, and engagement with a rapidly changing global society. This era encompasses the papacies of Pope Benedict XVI, 2005 to 2013, and Pope Francis, 2013, present, both of whom have confronted challenges posed by secularization, globalization, political instability, technological advancement, and ethical debates while maintaining the Church's core doctrines. Pope Benedict XVI, born Joseph Ratzinger, was elected on April 19, 2005, following the death of Pope John Paul II. A theologian of considerable renown, Benedict XVI emphasized continuity with church tradition, doctrinal clarity, and intellectual engagement with contemporary issues. He sought to reaffirm the centrality of the sacraments, the primacy of Scripture, and the authority of church teaching in the face of growing secularization in Europe and other regions. Benedict addressed contemporary ethical and social questions, including bioethics, moral relativism, and the role of religion in public life, highlighting the importance of objective moral norms grounded in Catholic theology. Benedict XVI also focused on global interreligious dialogue. Building on the efforts of his predecessors, he emphasized cooperation with other Christian denominations, particularly in addressing doctrinal and social issues, while maintaining the Catholic Church's doctrinal integrity. Dialogue with Judaism, Islam, and other world religions was pursued to foster peace, mutual understanding, and ethical collaboration in a world marked by religious pluralism and conflict. He also engaged with political leaders and international organizations to address human rights, education, and social justice concerns. During his papacy, Benedict faced the ongoing global challenge of declining religious participation in Europe, particularly among youth, and controversies surrounding clerical sexual abuse. His administration implemented measures to enhance transparency, accountability, and pastoral care in affected regions. He also promoted education and the formation of clergy to ensure adherence to moral and doctrinal standards. Benedict XVI emphasized the importance of Catholic education, maintaining that schools and universities were essential for transmitting faith, cultivating ethical reasoning, and fostering leadership capable of navigating modern society. In 2013, Benedict XVI resigned the papacy on February 28, becoming the first pope in nearly 6 centuries to do so voluntarily. His resignation was driven by concerns over age and health, marking a significant historical precedent. The resignation underscored the human limitations of even the highest office in the Church while reflecting a pragmatic approach to leadership continuity. Following this, Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, was elected on March 13, 2013, becoming the first pope from Latin America and the first Jesuit pope. Pope Francis has emphasized reform, social justice, environmental stewardship, and pastoral outreach. His encyclical Laudato Si, 2015, addressed ecological concerns, highlighting the moral imperative for environmental responsibility and sustainable development. Francis has also focused on poverty alleviation, migration, human rights, and global inequality, framing these issues within Catholic social teaching. His approach emphasizes a church that is close to the marginalized, advocating for both spiritual and social care. Francis has pursued interreligious dialogue, fostering relationships with leaders of Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and other faiths. He has sought to bridge cultural, political, and religious divides, promoting peace and cooperation on humanitarian, ethical, and environmental issues. This reflects a continuation of Vatican II's vision, emphasizing engagement with the modern world while maintaining doctrinal clarity. Contemporary challenges facing the Church include globalization, technological transformation, political instability, secularization, and ethical debates surrounding bioethics, family structures, and human rights. The Church continues to address these issues through papal encyclicals, pastoral letters, synods, and global conferences. Catholic institutions, including schools, universities, hospitals, and charitable organizations, play a vital role in implementing the Church's mission, serving millions worldwide while promoting moral and spiritual values. Global Catholicism has continued to expand, particularly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, with over 1.3 billion adherents as of 2025. The Church maintains hierarchical governance, with the Pope in Rome as the central authority, supported by cardinals, bishops, priests, and deacons. Diocesan and local structures adapt to regional cultures and social contexts while preserving doctrinal unity. Missionary activity continues, emphasizing education, healthcare, and social welfare, reflecting a holistic approach to evangelization that combines spiritual and practical service. The Church has also adapted to modern communication and media. Vatican media platforms, online publications, and social media channels enable global outreach, information dissemination, and engagement with younger audiences. Papal addresses, catechetical materials, and official documents are now accessible worldwide in multiple languages, allowing the Church to maintain influence and moral authority in a digital age. Contemporary governance and reform initiatives have included efforts to address clerical abuse, increase transparency in financial and administrative structures, and strengthen laity involvement in church affairs. Pope Francis has encouraged synodality, promoting collaborative decision-making and consultation with bishops and lay members on global and local issues. These efforts aim to balance hierarchical authority with inclusivity, ensuring that the Church remains responsive to the needs of its members while maintaining doctrinal integrity. The Church continues to confront political challenges, including the persecution of Christians in various regions, restrictions on religious freedom, and complex relationships with secular states. Through diplomatic engagement, advocacy, and humanitarian initiatives, the Church seeks to protect the rights of believers and promote peace, justice, and reconciliation worldwide. Vatican diplomacy, coordinated through the Secretariat of State and Apostolic Nuncios, ensures the Church's voice remains influential in international relations. By 2025, the Roman Catholic Church will have established itself as a global institution that balances tradition with engagement in contemporary social, political, and environmental issues. Its hierarchical structure under the Pope in Rome provides doctrinal consistency, while global outreach through education, healthcare, missionary work, and diplomacy ensures relevance in a rapidly changing world. The papacies of Benedict XVI and Francis illustrate the spectrum of leadership approaches, emphasizing both doctrinal continuity and pastoral reform, ensuring the Church's enduring influence on spiritual, moral, and cultural life.